Hello everyone, I am Dorela Kokdio, speech and language pathologist from the University of Medicine, Tirana, Albania. I'm going to present my work Orofacial Praxis Skills in Children with Development Disorders. I would like to start the presentation with a beautiful saying. Speech is a joint effort of the mind and the mouth. Orofacial praxis bridges the gap by teaching the muscles to dance to the rhythm of our thoughts. This is the table of contents. According to the literature review, the study of early childhood speech and language development has been conducted through multiple academic disciplines, which include speech language pathology, development psychology, and neuroscience research. The field defines orofacial praxis as the capacity to create and execute synchronous movements that involve facial and oral muscles which people need for speaking purposes. According to Cal, children who have development disorders show oromotor coordination deficits which cause their speech development to be delayed or impaired. On the other hand, Mukaka indicates that speech development requires both physical body parts and usable body systems to be functioning together. The tongue, lips, jaw, and palate form a coordinated mechanism that enables articulation and phonation. Studies have shown that impairments in these structures can affect sound production. However, functional abilities such as motor planning and coordination are considered more critical determinants of effective communication. In addition, vocal imitation and phonation represent early vocal behaviors which serve as essential building blocks for language development. The process of developing speech and communication abilities during early childhood shows multiple complexities which arise from both biological components, structural elements, and functional elements. In addition, the ability to plan, coordinate, and execute facial and oral muscle movements defines orofacial praxis, which serves as a vital element for learning speech and language abilities. These children with development disorders face significant challenges when their oromotor coordination and praxis abilities become impaired because these factors restrict their sound production, speech imitation, and communication development. The growing number of development disorders combined with the need for early diagnosis and treatment requires understanding how orofacial praxis problems develop in different situations. Within this context, the paper aims to examine how these factors occur together with their effect of speech development in children who have development disorders. It also aims to find key predictors who will help create evidence-based methods for multidisciplinary treatment. The present study adopts a quantitative observational research designed to investigate how orofacial praxis skills relate to speech development in children who have development disorders. The sample consists of 80 children aged between 2 and 6 years, selected to present early development stages in which speech and oral motor abilities are actively emerging. Two main instruments were used to collect data, which included an observation schedule that assessed orofacial praxis and a semi-structured interview that was conducted with the parents of each child. The variables were derived mainly as arithmetic means of the recorded observations and interview responses which were collected during the study. A total of 22 variables were included in the analysis. The statistical analysis was conducted through two different assessment phases. Pearson correlation coefficient was used to measure the strength and direction of relationships which exist between two different variables. The researchers used hierarchical multiple linear regression with a stepwise method to measure how various groups of variables impact speech development. A two-tailed test was used to measure statistical significance, which established p smaller than 0.05 as the threshold for significant results and p smaller than 0.01 as the threshold for highly significant findings. The variables were inserted into the model according to their statistical significance, which established p smaller than 0.5 as the threshold for inclusion and p bigger than 1 as the threshold for removal. The findings derived from the study generate an extensive and detailed comprehension of how orofacial praxis interacts with structural features and functional capabilities to impact speech growth in children who have development disorders. Both correlational analysis and hierarchical regression analysis were used to show how different sets of variables work together to create the process of speech development. The findings provide strong evidence which shows that speech development occurs through multiple factors which interact with each other throughout the entire process. This is because biological factors, anatomical structures, and oromotor skills keep working together. The analysis in this table shows Pearson correlation coefficients which vary from weak to strong to demonstrate different levels of association that exist in biological, structural, and functional areas of research. The functional variables showed better correlation with speech outcomes than the biological factors. The anatomical system demonstrated high internal coherence because structural variables of the system showed meaningful correlations between themselves. The correlation results demonstrate that speech development requires analysis of multiple interacting systems, which include biological elements, structural components, and functional aspects that work together in a dependent relationship. Current literature had shown similar findings which demonstrate that all anatomical parts work together during orofacial development. For example, Tomasello's study produced crucial results which established how speech development links to functional elements. Furthermore, it was evident that early vocal abilities served as essential components for developing speech skills. Important relationship was also detected between tongue movement and two vocal abilities, which included vocal imitation and phonation. A moderate connection was found between breathing patterns and oral habits, which suggests that physiological processes work together with behavioral elements to create orofacial development patterns. The study discovered that feeding methods directly impact both speech abilities and oral motor skills. Therefore, hierarchical multiple regression analysis was used to examine how different variables interacted with each other as shown in this table. The first model, which tested biological factors, showed medical history as the only variable that reached statistical significance for predicting 8.2% for speech outcome. The explanatory power of Model 2 improved greatly when structural variables were added to the model. The tongue functioned as a major predictor, which explained 19.3% of speech variation. The research demonstrated that structural functional components, especially the tongue function, as essential elements for effective speech production. The research showed that vocal imitation served as the primary indicator of speech because it predicted 57.7%. The result demonstrated how orofacial praxis impacts speech development in children who have development disorders. It was established that speech development requires multiple elements, which include functional elements, structural elements, and biological elements. Speech development also depends on structural aspects because tongue and palate functions shape speech patterns, although these aspects have less impact than functional abilities. Biological and medical history factors show a low impact on speech outcomes because they only affect early development periods without creating specific speech results. Based on these findings, several recommendations can be proposed. First, special attention is needed to the identification of orofacial praxis difficulties, which should be conducted in all cases that involve children who experience development disorders. Second, intervention programs need to focus on developing vocal imitation skills together with oral motor abilities because these two areas provide the most significant benefits for speech development. Speech therapists, together with pediatricians and psychologists, to develop a multidisciplinary approach which will help them treat the complex speech development problems that patients present. The study produces important results but needs to acknowledge its various research limitations. The research study used 80 children as their main sample, which restricts researchers from applying their results to other groups of people. The research study needs a bigger sample, which includes different types of participants, because this will produce better results that reflect actual conditions. The study design uses observational methods together with cross-sectional methods, which prevent researchers from establishing definite causal links between variables. Researchers use regression analysis to create predictive models, but the results do not allow for complete causal relationship to be established. Another limitation arises from its particular methods of collecting data. In addition, data analysis did not consider various relevant factors, which included socioeconomic background and parental educational level and environmental factors, which resulted in studies result being impaired. Thank you.